For the owners listening, the theme around all four C's is owner decentralization. Let's put you in the seat that you love. Let's put you in the seat that you're good at. And then let's hire great people and build great systems to do everything else.
There's no silver bullet in sales, but on Sales Against the Odds, we're here to give you the best shot at building a sales infrastructure that helps you scale. I'm your host, Lee Brumbaugh. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Sales Against the Odds. My name is Lee Brumbaugh, CEO of Sales Xceleration. Very excited to have Scott Snider on with us today. Scott is the president of EPI, the Exit Planning Institute. He worked on creating the value acceleration methodology, where you take a strategic framework, you help business owners simply increase the value of their companies while preparing to successfully exit. I've known Scott, amazing what they've done at EPI. The CEPA community, as they call it, has grown to thousands across the globe. So very excited to have Scott with us here today. Thanks for joining us, Scott.
Thanks for having me, man. Excited. Thanks.
Yeah. So Scott, let's jump in. When you think about it, we've had these conversations before. There'll be a lot of SMB owners that join us. That's typically our audience. And one of the things we talk about today is when you think about that biggest disconnect. So you've got a certified exit plan, you've got a CEPA that's working with the business owners. Where do they find that biggest exit when you start to work with business owners, or that biggest area that you can make an impact, that disconnect?
For many owners, I think one of the biggest impacts is the simple change of mindset. But it's not as simple, because I think for many of us as business owners, we've kind of grown up with a way that we do business, right? Like I could tell you that when I started hanging out with my dad, who created the value acceleration methodology, I've always had this kind of income generation mindset versus income and value and the relationship of it. And then I've also had this, like, how do I create an extremely successful company, one with profitable revenue, great people, great culture, strong customers. And that made me a successful company year over year. And I think the biggest mindset shift then and the biggest challenge kind of right out of the gate is, how do I move from successful year over year to long-term significance, which is, for us at EPI, we would define a significant company that's one that's highly valuable, ready, and attractive, but that's also aligned to the business owner's business, personal, and financial goals. And so I think that's the biggest area that people start to think about exit planning, and they think about, I got to exit my business. They kind of forget about the personal and financial planning, and they have built a company maybe over 20 years, focused on success and not necessarily significance. And there's a difference. And so that's probably the first, kind of hurdle or thought when we start interacting with owners, is their just existing mindset. It's good. It's probably created a lot of success, but that success doesn't necessarily translate to value.
Looking at the methodology, and one of the areas it talks about, I want to make sure I have it right, was kind of that structural kind of capital area. We're thinking sales, right? And so many times that sales process isn't documented. How do you make them realize that it's more than just kind of cash flow and it's EBITDA? It's seeing the bigger picture of having processes in place where the business can exist without them. How do you make that shift?
Spot on. You guys, I would say, operate in customer capital and structural capital. And so again, you guys participate in the year-over-year success for the company. You actually participate in the long-term significance as well, the value side. And so you're spot on. I would say when we're talking about revenue generation, sales, customers, most companies in America, like 94% of them, are under $5 million in value. So we're either saying, look, that's just my business and that's how we're operating, or they're saying, look, I want to enter this lower middle market, and I want to go 5 million plus, so how do I scale it? So whether we're operating in that company or trying to scale it to north of 5 million, what we typically find in terms of structural capital is, I always kind of smile when I'm hanging out with my owners that are our friends, and they go, man, Scott, we're crushing this year. I'm our best salesperson. And I laugh kind of like that, and I say, all due respect, you might be totally right, but that makes you a successful company, not a long-term significant one. What I mean by that is that we should always be trying to decentralize ourselves and replicate ourselves. And through structural capital, we're able to build system structure, playbooks, buyer personas that allow us to teach others and empower them to actually be a better or the best salesperson in our company, so that we're generating revenue whether I'm in the office or not. I struggled with this myself in my landscaping business that was a micro market company, less than 5 million of value. And I was, in fact, our only salesperson. If you think about it in terms of value, well, who's going to buy that? Because when they buy that and I finish my transition period, well, who the hell's doing sales? No, we have to train someone, and then there's all that. So, or I could look at the same landscaping company who has the structural capital and go, man, that's actually going to sell for a higher multiple because I don't need Scott to make that happen. He's got at least another sales guy that knows what's going to happen, and I can replicate that person because we have the training modules, we have the playbook, we have the data that we want to track, we have the system, the process, all that structural capital. So that's what we're always looking at it from a buyer's perspective, not just from our perspective internally.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was before with Sales Acceleration was on kind of the private equity side, and so many times you're looking at so much of it is in the numbers, right? When you're looking at acquisition of a company and those types of things, but it is so much more. It's the replication, not only from having your ducks from a finance, but from an operational perspective, from a sales perspective. And if the founder is tied into all of those areas, it is so problematic, as you allude to. So one of the areas that strikes me is you're looking at this, right? So if we're looking at a company, it's a $5 million company. The owner is like, all right, I'm going to get my $20 million check out of it. They get into it. They've got adjusted a EBITDA of, let's say, 2 million, and that multiplier comes in at a 4. And they're just, whether they're tightening up sales process or strategy, it's not there, right? How do your CEPAs help from kind of a value creation standpoint? How deep do you get in there? What do you find is typically missed? And I guess when it comes to value creation, do you find owners can pivot and look differently? I'd love to just hear your thoughts on kind of value creation.
So the short answer for any owner listening is absolutely. I don't care if you own a $2 million company or a $20 million company or a 50 or 100, or you're just starting out. We have to begin where I'm trying to shift a whole mindset is back to this value creator mindset. So it is there, and there's tools to help you get there. Now, when we talk about what we are referring to is we would call this the value gap, and how do we start to close that value gap? So let's talk about a little bit of a clarity moment around who CEPAs are. I find that particularly for the business owner, sometimes it can be a little confusing because CEPAs are different types of advisors. So I want you to think about CEPA as like a feather in your cap. It's an additional thing that you are. It's not necessarily who you are. What I mean by that is there's got to be a bunch of advisors in our journey that surround us. And they're going to surround us in 3 ways: from the business perspective, from a personal perspective, and from a personal financial perspective. So therefore, you likely are to have an attorney, a CPA, a financial advisor, wealth manager, a consultant, a general business consulting that's helping business improvements. And you might even have like a performance coach or a personal planner help you kind of figure out life a little bit, right? And then you're going to have functional advisors that come in and out of the equation to address different needs inside of your business. So all of those folks can and are certified exit planning advisors. So the certified exit planning advisor role, when you see that as a business owner after their name, it tells you maybe 3 or 4 things. 1, those folks understand how value is driven in your business and how your goals are aligned from a business, personal, and financial perspective. They lead with value in mind, they're value centric, and that they're relationship builders. So they don't want to be a transaction. They really want to build a relationship with you as the owner. And also, given that they're relationship oriented, it tells you that they're masterful at connecting and collaborating with people. So when I see that the business has gotten a diagnostic done and we're identifying a sales strategy problem, they go, hey, I might be your wealth manager, so I don't do anything on the business. I'm your personal financial advisor, but I'm going to go call Lee because I'm going to bring in Lee because he's a specialist inside of this functional area that has need. And so the way that we're addressing that value gap is by identifying first what it is. So you talked about structural capital. We're going to look at the 4 intangible capital, structural being one of them, and identify the blind spots in our business. That's going to then match to a multiplier inside of our industry. Could be 2 times, could be 20 times. Typically, it's between like 5 and maybe 15, give or take. And we're going to show you how you line up. And so to your point, you discussed a scenario where I want it to be worth 20 million, but it's only worth 5. Well, that would mean I have a $15 million value gap. And the question becomes, How do I get there? And you get there by actively measuring and managing the four intangible capitals. And that'll tick your multiplier up.
Good explanation on the CEPA. And before you jump into that too,
Yeah.
I love your analysis of that because we have SX advisors that also wear the CEPA cap, right? And it's a great way to be able to model some of these areas and still help as you get into the weeds for whether it's sales or finance. So good explanation on that.
Your folks are, I believe, like the ideal example because the way you guys are showing up is that we do sales strategy. We can pump in some profitable revenue, help bring structural capital to the game, and give you a more successful company, right? Like we're going to get some wins right out of the gate. We're going to drive revenue up. We're going to drive profits up. But if that advisor has CEPA after their name too, this person knows that not only are you going to drive revenue up and profitability up, but they're actually going to talk to me about how that affects the value of my company. And they're likely going to have a little bit of a conversation with me around the holistic view of what that means from a business, personal, and financial standpoint. They're not going to do the personal planning. They're not going to do the financial planning, the estate planning. But I also know that they're a part of a global community of advisors. Your sales guy could go, your sales consultant can go, you know what? I actually know a really great performance coach. We need to help you kind of figure out what you want to do after you exit this thing. So let me bring in a personal planner. And so you become actually a pretty valuable resource. And I think owners of the future, people in their 50s, 40s, 30s, even in their 20s, they look for their advisors of any kind to be relationship drivers. They don't want you just transaction. I'm bringing the sales consultant to help drive sales and that person's going to leave. They want you to bring some value to them. You guys actually are a perfect example because I think most owners also think that professional advisors are their CPA and their attorney. And when we start to change the mindset into value creation, if trained well, they can show up talking to you about that whole equation and then bring in the right people along the way. So you're actually driving more value to them than just revenue growth. You're driving relationships. And think about that. If you have an owner that is totally confused in what to do and lacks identity outside of their business, but their sales consultant helped them change that mindset through a professional that they brought in, they're totally going to keep you guys around in the relationship because you're more than just a revenue driver. You're like, dude, this guy friggin' changed my life. Or this guy just saved me a boatload of taxes because he got me with this estate planning attorney and I got an awesome trust now. Like, who was that introduction? Well, I was the sales consultant that I brought in. They're like, sales consultant? How the hell did he know an estate planning attorney? He's like, well, they're trained in this collaborative way where they're supposed to be doing this through the connection of people. So to me, it's a new way of trying to do business, but I think it matches the mentality of the next generations of owners that we're going to be working with.
Obviously, EPI does this well in that sales acceleration. That's our secret sauce, is that referral, that ecosystem, right? And we at Sales Acceleration want to be on the forefront because if, like you said, if we can make the introductions that help you create more value in your company, yes, from a sales perspective, but how do you understand from a finance perspective when you need HR brought in? And then how do you see the big picture of where your company's heading? Those things make it a true partnership. Those are the people that drive value. It's not just tactical, but it's tactical to the whole side of the business. The days of just consulting and giving you, 50 pieces of paper of here's how you need to fix your sales are done. It's what do you need to do to fix it now? What is your strategy for the next year? But how does that strategy tie into how you eventually exit the company? When we do that well, we drive so much more value than what we do in a transactional type environment.
Think about your team, right? Like your sales acceleration consultants out in the field, when they're matched up against your competitor, they can drive that kind of value or just honestly bestow that kind of knowledge. Like it really opens up the owner's mind to say, oh, like I get it now. And you guys were the catalyst for that. Take your competition out of the way because the owner goes, man. And then that owner goes, he's hitting some golf balls or doing whatever they do. And they go, dude, I just brought in the sales consultant. So the sales plan looks great. But dude, I hooked up with this estate planning attorney. I'm saving a boatload of taxes. You got to call this guy. This is wild. So it's like, oh, cool. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do inside of the sales strategy side, but I'm also adding value here. And I think you're spot on. There's like maybe a couple hot topics straight out of the gate for the exit planning community and in the professional advisory space, particularly those core advisors like a CPA. But I would assume in your world too, obviously AI is all around us. And so frankly, what I think you're going to see many smaller company owners do is they're going to try to DIY it, right? They're going to try to figure it out themselves by typing it into Google, and they have that cool AI tool. So it's like, oh, this is how I change my sales strategy. Got it. I'm going to try that. And so if you're just walking in to be transactional, you're out. I just don't think that's what people are looking for anymore because they don't need to, because that's just right at their fingertips. The way we combat that is to drive value to the conversation and actually to the owner from a business, personal, or financial aspect. That's why they have you come around and stick around.
Most companies don't have the bandwidth to build a high-functioning sales department to allow them to meet their revenue targets. With Sales Xceleration, they don't have to. Our experienced fractional sales leaders consult and implement your sales strategy, infrastructure, management, and team development. Discover how we deploy these proven sales solutions to address your sales challenges by going to our website and filling out the contact form. We'd love to hear from you. We do a lot with productivity partners, right? So Scott, when you think about it, like it's lead generation, it's management, coaching, like how do we use AI? And I've had a lot of guests that have come on the podcast that have talked about AI is more about solving the business problem first, not just inserting tools. And so what we're really focused on right now, we have a new tool that we've rolled out looking at from a value creation towards AI. How do you analyze where the gaps are in your company? Where do you really need AI to fit in? And then we've got a service side of that says, all right, we'll implement the tools based on what your business needs. And then we're going to support that. Because so many times they get 3 to 4 tools and then 3 to 4 tools sit on the shelf and they don't get the pull through into the organization. And again, it just goes back to our whole conversation is being holistic on what the business need is the biggest approach, whether what you're doing, whether we're doing. So it makes a ton of sense. So one of the other things that has been top of mind that I think about it, where are you seeing, for the companies that are doing well, right? They're getting the higher multipliers. They had the company here, CEPA. Thank you again for the explanation on the details of CEPA. Where are you seeing the biggest bang for the buck of this company is doing it right because a CEPA guided me? How are you seeing companies really drive up that multiple? Or what if I'm a business owner today, I'm thinking I just got told my multiplier is a 4, I get to a 6. What are you things, the tangible things that you're seeing happen? Yeah.
You certainly teed it up, right? So structural capital is a part of these 4 C's. So the short answer is, if you're getting a higher multiple against all your other competitors, it's probably because that company has a strong 4 C's. It's where 80% of a company's value lies. And so when I talk about the 4 C's are human capital, so your people, customer capital, your customers, structural capital, all the process, how to, the optimization system, all that kind of stuff. And then you have social capital, which is your culture. And I would say that for the owners listening, the theme around all 4 C's is owner decentralization. Let's put you in the seat that you love. Let's put you in the seat that you're good at. And then let's hire great people and build great systems to do everything else. And then that allows it to be scalable. So think about it as well as just a good contingency plan, particularly for our owners that might own micro market companies that are listening, like my landscaping company. If I died when I had my landscaping company would have literally went out of business, because no one knew what the hell to do, right? They took orders from me. The strategy was my strategy. The vision was my vision. The marketing was my marketing, and the sales were my sales. No one could do it. And in that owner-operator style business, particularly one that you're out there on your feet and using your hands, if I got in a tragic accident and lost one of my legs, that business probably would have went out of business. So it's also, I think, just an active, great strategy to have, to always be decentralizing yourself. But going back to the 4 C's. So when you think about human capital, why the companies are getting higher multiples is because the buyers coming in and analyzing something like human capital and saying, how gritty are these people? Are they really helping drive vision and strategy? What's their mentality? What kind of culture do they live in? What is their knowledge? How long have they been there? How are they rating the company in an employee satisfaction way, right? Better the score, stronger the company. Then combine that with, let's call it the second 4C, structural capital, which we kind of talked about, right? Do they have repeatable, scalable process set? When you say, hey, I have a sales playbook, can you quite literally pull it up? Can you print it off? And can you share it with me? And then, oh, by the way, when was the last time it was updated? So we're looking at those kind of things. Then you're going to go look at customer capital. This goes into the funny story of, I'm our best salesperson. Well, that can't be. If you want a highly valuable company, you have to have somebody better at sales than you and you have to have your buyer personas identified, but you also have to have long-term customers. Are these just kind of in and out kind of customers? Are they repeat buyers? Do we have long-term agreements with them? Are those agreements transferable? Is it profitable revenue, or is it, are we just have this client lingering around because he was my dad's buddy 20 years ago and he's still around? And then lastly, you have social capital, which is your culture. So we would describe culture in maybe four ways. One, what's the mentality of your people? So do they have a North Star that they're all marching towards, a guiding light, core values, trust accelerators, things of that nature? Two is vision. Are they bought into the vision? Are they helping create the vision? Short-term and long-term strategy. You're looking at a performance bucket, which I think it all kind of leads to, can we hit our numbers? Can we forecast and can we hit it? And then last but not least is a rhythm. What's your communication, right? Do you just walk into the shop floor or onto the landscape crew or into the office and people just sit at their desk and just go? Or are you bringing people together as their heartbeat? And so the stronger all of those are together, the higher the multiple. And if all four of them are strong, you're going to look at what's called outlier multiples. You might look at an industry that's anywhere between 5 and 10, but there's some guys getting 13 or 14. If you're looking at 13 or 14, it's because all four of those C's are super strong. And the kicker is that the owner is planned personally and financially, because what the buyer doesn't want is for me to get cold feet right at the end, or for me to be like lingering around the office. They're like, dude, you're a minority owner right now, like, and you don't have an operational role. Like, we don't need you here, So typically what we find is that the business could be strong, but the owner was ill prepared for the next phase and is tinkering around back in their business, or right at the last minute goes, you know what? I didn't like that guy. I don't like this guy. I'm not selling this thing. And so that's the kicker. So the outlier multiples are going to companies and people that do those types of things.
Good explanation. Very clean to think about in those 4C areas, and they all make sense. You mentioned kind of that human and social as you're talking, it was kind of connecting those two. And we mentioned so much of this podcast already, it's decentralization of the owner, right? So let's say you're that $5 million company. You've really done a nice job of, you've developed kind of a small leadership team. There's 4 to 5 kind of key personnel that are driving, as you call it, the human capital and the social capital element. What did companies do well? Because I'm trying to buy the company, right? And I'm thinking about this company, and how do I know of those 4 people on that leadership team, they're going to want to stick around? How do owners do a good job of tying that together to make sure those key employees that are driving human capital and social capital continue to, 1, stick around, and 2, be just as motivated?
Two sides. The first way I'd answer that is going back to social capital culture. Are your employees, that key executive team, contributing to long-term vision, long-term strategy, short-term strategy? And this is always the kicker. I get a lot of crap for this one, Lee. Are they tied to the P&L? Most owners don't want to share their P&L because they go, oh man, I don't want people thinking how much I make. I'm saying share it, but don't just share it. Educate them in it. So we get in this debate in my community about not sharing that level of detail. And I go, of course I wouldn't just like put it up on the screen and say, oh, look at this, I make 25 or 30% or 10%, whatever it might be. No, you got to educate them on how the business works. And so anyways, there's that side. So if I'm saying, well, these people are sticking around, they're not loyal to me, they're loyal to the brand. They're loyal to the company, they're loyal to the customer. These people love this company. They're in fact creating the vision. It's not even my vision anymore. So there's that. But then you can actually kind of lock them in. So what we have even at EPI for some of our key executives, you could do something like phantom stock. So they get a 1% of the company at point of sale, or you give them half of it at point of sale, half of them 1 year out after post sale. I think the buyers like that too, because they have some skin in the game and they don't have to ask them. They're already in it. So I think for the larger companies, you're looking at private equity groups are saying, look, we might want to tie them up for 2 years. So we want to put these these sale agreements or these these stay bonuses in. But what if the seller goes, oh, I already have that? The buyer's going to be like, oh, really? I gave a point to my key executive. Well, one, they've earned it, right? There's no way that my company would be worth outlier multiples without the people that are helping do it, right? It's not me that's just the value creator. It's we, the whole company, thinks like owners. And as such, we gifted them a percent. They're going to get half of that 1% at point of sale. That's a gift from me to them. they've earned it. And then when they stick around for the 2 years that they want to, and a good transition period, they're going to get the other percent from us, from the proceeds of ours. We're going to hold some, call it escrow money, that it's due to them after their 2 years of service if they're in good standing. And then you, the buyer, can cut whatever deal. The buyer might be like, shoot, I'll match that 1% and I'll have my own thing with them. The big thing when I start thinking about when I get asked, Lee, about the value creator employees, like there's no doubt that the business owners is going to participate in the biggest chunk of value at point of sale. And they're going to participate in the net profits of the company, because if we're doing value creation, the company's growing as well as our value is growing. So the company just becomes more profitable and the owner's participating in most of that. What you could also do is tie people into incentives based on profitability. Just like an owner would take a distribution at the end of the year, the employee's taking a cut as well based on performance. There's some stuff that you could do to tie them in today, and then you could say these people are really bought in. They're definitely going to stick around. I mean, hell, they can't earn half of their 1% if they leave, and they're going to want that. And then I would also say to the buyer, not only do we have that stuff in place, but I don't even drive strategy anymore. They do. So this is really their company without it being their company. And then you have to show the proof, right? You can't just say that, you got to show it. And so for me, that's how you get your employees tied in. I'd like to think whenever me and my father, who's also my business partner, go to exit our own business, that the 52 people here that work at EPI, I'd like to think that they like me, Lee, right? So I think they go, yeah, Scott's a good dude. But like whether Scott's here or not, man, this is my home. This is where I want to create my career. As long as the buyer doesn't mess it up, I guess, that's what I want, right? So that's probably a whole nother podcast for another day.
When you buy a company, there's risk. And when you have, like you said, culture alignment, social alignment, key employees that are bought in, and you can feel it, then that eliminates so much more of the risk. And they're also then created about the strategy session, which is the strategy areas, which is why a lot of people, especially on the strategic side, you're buying the company. I had a past client, as you were saying this, and we worked through, actually, I was just talking even this morning, but he had a temperature. He had that adjusted, the EBITDA goal. And we put, just old school, we're like coloring it in with pencil or whatever, it's like getting the top. But then when we hit there, all the employees would hit these areas. But it also drove not only for the value of the company, but also in the short term. It drove what we were doing day to day, our customer response time, how we interacted, even our frontline employees. We're trying to find new business. I mean, those are the things that you can do creatively to get buy-in. And it's not rocket science, but people get skeptical or hesitant because, well, now I got to release numbers. If you don't have transparency.
Leah, this is like a hot topic too, is the next generation of workforce employees. And I'm just telling you, if you just do a quick Google search and look at what millennials and Gen Xers are, right? So people between 28 years old in the millennial generation going all the way through Gen Xers who are turning 60 years old at the top end of now, they just think differently than their baby boomer counterparts. Not different bad, just different. It just is. And if you do any Google search, you'll find that both of those generations, and then Gen Z, the younger folks coming up after them, they naturally seek purpose in what they do. They don't want to just show up 9 to 5 and make the bolt. They want to know why they're making it. Like, hey, that goes on trucks that ship food across our country. Or that creates something that goes on a ship that serves in our military. Or they create professional education to empower advisors to go have deeper relationships with owners. People look for that in their jobs now. It's just a key leading force of value creator employees.
I totally agree with you. They have to feel like they are part of not only the vision, the solution. They'll be talking to you 3 months about what's the next step in their career when they just start. But that's okay, because again, if you're giving a runway to here's where we're going, here's how you can be a part of it, they do their job and they execute, then it all falls in line.
Right. And so they also love transparency. And that's what the tie back to the P&L that you were mentioning. If you educate them, now, if you do also the similar Google search, I'm sure there's some owners looking like, I wonder if Scott's full of it or not. So they're sitting their computers down and they're looking on their phone. Google something around like what the typical American employee thinks the owner makes. And it's astronomical. I think it's seriously like a non-value creator employee thinks that an owner is taking away like 45 to 50% net profit. And we all know that that's, for the most part, not the case. I'm not teaching that we should share the P&L just straight out of the gate. A value creation company educates on how a business is run and educates on the P&L and how everybody has a line item within it. We're all managing this thing together. And I think with that kind of education unlocks or empowers people to start to think like owners. Because for the owners listening, that's what we look at that stuff. Probably every day I'm looking at my P&L, making sure that the business is moving, right? And so why not take some time to educate? And if you're bringing your people together, so we bring our people at EPI together for 1 hour every Monday. And there's a 20-minute segment of that 1 hour company-wide meeting that's education. And so take the 20 minutes, educate them on P&L, and say, look, we're going to take 4 of these over the next 4 weeks, a month. We're going to teach you about the different areas of the P&L and why it matters and how they run. And then we're going to introduce the company P&L to you, and you'll see how much we all make. And maybe for the larger companies, they'll have a deeper appreciation for the taxes the business owner makes. So like I might take home 30%, but I'm really taking home half of that after I pay my good share of taxes across the board. And so it's not as much as you might think, though it might be a good chunk. And frankly, rightfully so, I take the most risk in the company. I think people value creator people. People here, my folks at EPI, they might say, cool, like, yeah, Scott seems to live a nice life, but dude takes a bunch of risk. He's a servant leader. He takes care of us. I don't look at 52 people out there, Lee. I look at 52 families. Families that rely on me and our company together to make this thing happen. And so, yeah, I might take home the biggest paycheck, but perhaps rightfully so. And maybe for our younger folks, I think some of the folks here, they won't spend a career here at EPI. They'll leave and go start their own company or go buy one. And hopefully they leave better here because of it. So obviously passionate about teaching P&L for sure, no doubt.
Yeah, and as a leader, that's what we want to see, right? If we truly care about our people, and like you said, a family, then we're developing people, and that's what we always want to be doing. And I love people that have worked with me in the past, and now they're doing bigger things and better things than I even imagined.
Right. It's like one of the reasons we start and build companies. I think I'm going to go out on my own. I really appreciate the opportunity here. Like I'm going to go start this is actually a true story. I'm going to go start a coffee house. Like, so I'm passionate about coffee and I'm going to go do that. I thought it was cool. If you need some investors, like I might be into that because I also know how you think already, right? So if you got that kind of grit of an entrepreneur, I might get in on that. So it's kind of cool.
Well, Scott, this has been great. I think the key things and it aligns so much of what we've been talking about, which is, again, building that strategic ecosystem, making sure you've got a culture that diversifies risk and really focus on how you grow the business. I mean, that's what we're trying to do in this podcast. I think you've given so many nuggets that we can take away from this today.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, man.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining. This has been another episode of Sales Against the Odds. Join us in 2 weeks. We'll have another thought leader that creatively, like Scott has done today, challenges us about how we think about growing our business. Thanks, everyone. You've been listening to Sales Against the Odds. Be sure to hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. And if you want more resources on scaling sales, check out our website at salesxceleration.com.